going over the presidency and the bureaucracy. This is a college class after all, so make sure you have your pens and papers ready because at the end there will be a quiz. Joining me today is my assistant Paul Gray, my assistant Joel Pagan, and the assistant professor Brandon Noren, who will be manning behind the camera. So if you have any questions, either save them for the end or just look on YouTube where this thing's going to get a dozen hits, I'm sure. So, make sure you have your notes ready. This is a hefty topic and we're going to get it done in about 10 minutes. So without further ado, here we go. To this video. Oh, sorry, Hank Green, for providing us with at least a nice introduction. But yes, today we're going to throw a twist in there. So starting off with the Constitution.
Constitution is specifically stated in Article 2 that in order for the president to become the president, he must have certain qualifications. He must be a natural-born citizen of the U.S., have at least 14 years prior to the election living in the United States, and at least 35 years of age. However, there are other qualifications not required, but certainly looked at to become the president. These requirements such as military background.
Which is George W. Bush.
You have
President political acceptability, which would be FDR. Married, which is pretty much everyone except for
James Buchanan, who was not married, the only president to have not been married.
And then other characteristics include
Partisan,
which is I killed the bank.
James, Andrew Jackson.
John McCain, which represents partisan.
Yes, the white
White Protestant.
Yeah, the white partisan.
Who did that? And following this includes historical background, which we all look in most as George Washington. But of course, there's the one exception, Obama.
He's different.
Yeah. So moving on to elections, I heard a little bit of chuckles there, starting with the Electoral College.
The Electoral College is very specifically important for the president. The president in the primary has to be elected in order to go to the general. That's where the general population votes for the president.
And there are stages in the Electoral College, starting with the primary elections. The primary elections are designed to select candidates to run for office. And there are two types. There's closed and open. There's a simple way of remembering this. Closed, think it's the door closed. Only those who have registered with a political party and identified themselves with either a Democrat or Republican are allowed to vote. Versus opens, the doors are open, somewhat like Key Club. Open doors allow those who are not associated with a party to be able to vote. In general elections,
people go to the open polls to vote for people who they want in the election to go and become president. Then, in December, the Electoral College counts all the votes, and we decide who becomes president in the
shared chambers of Congress.
testing.
But of course, in order to win, a candidate must receive a majority of 270 Electoral College votes. But if that majority is not achieved, it goes to the House of Representatives, where if no candidate for the president receives a majority of the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to choose the president of the top three. Biased much? Maybe. Presidential powers. The president has an array of powers at his disposal for world domination, including
the most three important: the executive, legislation, and judicial powers. Executive start with enforcing laws, treaties, and any sort of bills and court decisions. He makes executive orders, appoints officials, and assumes emergency powers during emergency times.
Legislative power includes issuing annual bills and budget for the economic report, signing or vetoing bills, and calling sessions to order in Congress. And I'm not going to list all of them because you should all know this, but these are the top three that you should consider. The other three include diplomatic powers, military powers, and party powers. The most important from these three include the ability to negotiate treaties, appoint ambassadors for diplomatic, military powers in order to serve as commander-in-chief of the army, final decision in matters of national and foreign defense, and party powers to lead his political party and choose the vice president, which we'll go into later. But the president is not as powerful as you may think. There are special limits on the president's power, which includes
override of presidential vetoes. Congress, both chambers of Congress, can veto any bill that the president has vetoed in the past with a 2/3 majority vote.
From both chambers. Other powers include power over the purse. And additional, we also have those listed. We won't go into all of these because we figured you should all know them. The War Powers Act is an especially unique one. But of these others, you should consider the public opinions and media attention and popularity, because even though the president is somewhat isolated, he still has to adhere to what the public desires. So it's important for this guy to at least pay attention to what his constituents like. Impeachments. So here's a question for all you smart students. You're all in college now. How many presidents within the United States, context under the Constitution, have been impeached? You have 3 seconds. 2. 1. If you said 0, you're all wrong. The answer is 2. These include Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. Nixon does not count. He left
Andrew
office.
Jackson.
Oh, really?
Andrew Johnson.
Andrew Johnson.
Andrew Jackson.
Richard Nixon does not count because he resigned before he could be impeached, so he got away with it, as many would like to say.
However, the 2 presidents that were impeached were not technically impeached. They were convicted of being impeached, but were not trialed as impeachment.
By the Senate. Moving on to the vice presidency, the qualifications are exactly the same as the president, so as long as you master the president's qualifications, you've got the vice president mostly down. The election process, on the other hand, is different.
The election process goes in hand with the president. The president and the political party choose the vice president to help balance the ticket, some sort of opposite of the president, just so helps balance the ticket and help the chances of winning the election.
And once in office, the vice president is limited to 2 4-year terms. But this does not mean that he cannot be in office more than once. So even if the president leaves, he can potentially be thrown back into vice president, as long as the party is in agreement. The vice president's duties are also similar, including presiding over the Senate and deciding tiebreakers, as well as taking part in cabinet meetings and serving under the National Council. But one very unique power of the vice president is his ability to help determine the presidential disability under the 25th Amendment. So if anything should happen to the president, and he goes down,
He's dead!
Mr. Vice President,
I solemnly declare upon that I will uphold the honor and dignity as given to me by the executive power in the Constitution.
the United States. Congratulations, you are now president, but you stole from my Federal Reserve, so I'm impeaching you as senator. Anyways, now handing it over to Joel Pagan and Mr. Brandon Norn as the assistant teachers for today to discuss the bureaucracy.
Hello class, we'll be talking about the bureaucracy.
You forgot your Federal Reserve. What the heck is a bureaucracy? A bureaucracy is a systematic way of organizing a complex and large administrative structure.
A bureaucracy is responsible for carrying out the day-to-day tasks of the organization.
The bureaucracy of the federal government is the single largest in the United States with 2.8 million workers.
There are 3 basic bureaucratic principles.
Hierarchy authority. Pretty much whoever's on top has the most power, just like Ms. Brooks has most power over us all.
Job specialization. Each worker has defined duties and responsibilities, a division of labor among workers.
Formal rules, established regulations, procedures, all that paperwork of how to do the shit you do.
The history and growth.
In the beginning, the standards for office included qualifications and political acceptability.
It has spoils system, practice of giving offices and government favors to political supporters and friends.
Can't forget the reform movement. Competitive exams were trialed but failed due to inadequate funding from Congress. As you know.
The Pendleton Act, Civil Service Act of 1883, passed after the assassination of Garfield by a disappointed office seeker.
I'm going to say this a little fast. Hatch Act of 1939, amended in 1993, prohibits government employees from engaging in political activities while on duty, running for office, receiving political funding while off duty, or if in sensitive positions may not be involved with political activities on or off duty.
The Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 created the Office of Personnel Management, replaced the Civil Service Commission.
Yeah, the easy one.
We're going through this very quickly, class, so you might as well know how to use your college skills. Continue on.
Organization. The federal bureaucracy is generally divided into 4 basic types.
Here we go again. Cabinet members, 15 executive departments created to advise the president or operate a specific policy area of government duty. Each department is headed by a secretary, except the Department of Justice, which is headed by an attorney general.
Independent executive agencies, similar to departments but without cabinet status, like NASA and Small Business Administration.
It's going to get short now. Independent regulatory agencies, independent from the executive, created to regulate or, police everybody.
Government corporations created by Congress to carry out businesses like activities generally charged for services. Influences on the federal bureaucracy.
Executive influences, appointing the right people issuing executive orders affecting the agency's budget and pretty much reorganizing the entire thing.
Congressional influences. Influencing appointments affecting the agency's budget, holding hearings, rewriting legislation, or making legislation more detailed.
Iron triangles. Iron triangles are alliances that develop between bureaucratic agencies, interest groups, and congressional committees or subcommittees because of a common goal that kind of gets them where they need to go.
Issue networks. Individuals in Washington located within interest groups, congressional staffs, think tanks, universities, and the media.
Sources cited.
I hope you all got that class. There'll be a quiz. Next class we come, we're running out of time. So we'll skip that for today. Your grades are all passed for now. Don't fail me later. Class dismissed.